Hello everyone, welcome to a new edition of Jan's opening clinic, which, humble as I am, I titled after myself. Problem is, I'm a little sick, so first of all I'm wondering if I'll make it through the show, but I'm optimistic on that front, and I'm hoping to avoid having to go to a real clinic anytime soon. A fun weekend, like taking my medicine every... It's said you should use it 5-6 times per day, but it tasted good and I think it contained a little alcohol. So I have a feeling I might have cheated a little bit and taken it 15-16 times, but I feel like twice as good as had I taken it regularly. So it's all good, and you can see I am a real doctor by that little statement alone. That's why I hope I can help you with your opening problems. You know how this show goes. It's supposed to be a 90-minute show, and I just checked. I think there's like 75 questions. So there's not a lot of time to answer each and every question. I'm always torn. If I answer the questions properly, I will probably make it through 10 or 15. But to please everybody, it's going to be very hard. I'm sure we'll do overtime, but I have a feeling I might have to mess with the format a little bit. Either make it fewer questions or not. So yeah, put some thought into this. So since we don't have time, let's get started. How did I do this? Yeah, this is where the questions are, and then I hopefully have another screen where the chessboards are. That's always the same chessboard. Also, if you guys can read the chat, I'm always very happy about feedback in the early beginnings of every show. We can see you, hear you, your hair looks gorgeous, get well soon, that kind of stuff. And there's a horrible echo. The usual. So I can see the chat now. It looks like there's not a lot of complaints. Therefore, let's get to the real thing. And Marcelinho 82 going for some serious business. In the very first question, he's saying, I have a question about the Botvinnik variation. Long variation, 14 castles, c5 is the main line. 95 is less good, but I don't understand why. Please, can you explain the reason why it is less good? Thanks for your time to answer that question. Now let's try to do my magic and put it on the board. I'm always doing this awkward transition clicking thingy here. I'm not very good at the opening clinic yet. Should do it more often. And it looks like people can hear me and see me beautiful. This is not the position you want to see, even though shout out to my boy Jeffrey Zhong, who won the World Junior Championship in pretty convincing style as far as I heard. But you want to see this position? I also doubt it. You probably want to see this position, because that's what Marcelinho asked about. The move knight to e5. This move is not very good as far as I know because of d takes e5. Might not look so obvious, sacrifice the queen here, but that's the way to go, and that's the reason why c5, d5, b4, all this chaos has a much better reputation. So knight e5, d e5, rook d1. Both rook captures are interesting. I believe I slightly prefer rook a-d1, because in some lines you want to go rook f-e1. This position turns out to be just better for white. He's down a queen, but this pawn is weak, which is important. It's very hard for black to properly develop his queen side, his king side, and white has a nice passed pawn, very active pieces. It takes computers a bit to understand this, and at first sight your computer might even give a black advantage, but the more you keep clicking around here after b4, knight e4, c5, and any move, rook f-e1 or bishop f4 have been popular in practical play. White is just better, and that, in my opinion, is the reason why this line is not more popular, and I wouldn't want to play it with black, frankly. So it might be a little surprising, especially for computers. It's a little hard because they love queen so much, but knight e5 just gives up too much. After d5, white gains space, repairs the structure, and has a lot of beautiful pieces. It's not a good line for black. Therefore, if you want to play the Botvinnik, you want to check out the c5, d5, b4 business, which is a lot of work to do here as well. So that was question number 1. 1 down, 72 to go. I believe I haven't counted. Some more awkward transition clicking. That's my specialty. Never learning. That is the beauty. We have Mr. Jarekson, who is saying, why do all of the people seem to play Queen's Gambit except against me? And is there a good way to spice it up against some dull lines like d4, d5, c4, dc, knight f3, e6, e3, bishop e7? I must admit I've never heard of or seen that line in my whole life, or faced it. Especially move bishop e7, or some way to avoid Queen's Gambit accepted. Not that I'm an aggressive player, but just looks like a drawing machine, this line. Thank you for your help and for your magnificently fantastic work for Chess24. Yeah, thanks, man. Flattery always works. It is awesome, and you should all go premium, people. There, you heard it. Let me try to answer that question. I'm not sure I'll be able to do it, but I shall certainly try. d4, d5, c4, dc4. As ways to avoid the Queen's Gambit accepted, I sometimes go c4 if you're playing against a real specialist and you don't want to do it. Here there's no Queen's Gambit accepted, but of course, it's always a price. You can play e5 or c5. One e4 also avoids it. The d4, d5, bishop f4 avoids it, for example. But c4, d takes c. Here, the best and most challenging move is the move 3e4. I don't always play it because it involves a lot of work. You gotta be ready for knight c6, knight f6, e5, c5, and b5. So it's a bit of work, but this is a way to punish these system players that you seem to be facing every game. I don't face them that often. So this is one way to do it. And this line you mentioned, knight f3, e6, e3, bishop e7 I've never seen. Like knight f6, bishop c4, c5, castles, a6 is the main line at this level, which is kind of interesting. Bishop b3, bishop d3, or dc5 all lead to playable positions. Other moves as well, queen e2, a4, or b3. And I do believe that black is okay here, hence 3e4 is more challenging, but I wouldn't call it very dull. And this bishop e7, bishop c4, knight f6 I'm assuming, let's say castles, castles. These positions I'd be very happy with white. I play queen e2, intending to go e4. Guess black would play c5. I would take, trying to make use of the fact that this bishop has already moved. And if it has to recapture, these positions might look equalish at first sight, but I don't think that's the case. White has two good plans here. One is to go e4, followed by e5, and then to checkmate the king, let's say, I don't know. None of these lines will stand up to scrutiny. I'm giving more ideas here. Bishop d3, intending queen e4, and you normally get a decent initiative on the king side. That's one idea. And another plan I like, once again I'm talking plans, is to play a3. Let's give another sample line. Knight c6, b4. Put my bishop here, then go knight bd2, and follow it up with either e4 or bishop to d3, knight to e4 or knight to c4. And yeah, I like these positions for white, so I have not encountered the problem you've encountered. But if you dislike the knight f3 positions, then you should go e4. I hope that helped a little bit. We have another guy with real-life chess problems. Hi Jan, I'm a Nimzo player. Nasty King 37, that is. But I have a problem finding a good alternative for white. For when white doesn't play d4, c4, doesn't play c4, d4, knight c3. Instead plays 3, knight f3 and just plays solidly. Gotta hate it when they play solidly with white. What would you recommend? See, I can't speak at all. What would you recommend? Queen's Indian, Bogo Indian, or just play 3d5. I don't really like playing against a Catalan though. You might be barking up the wrong tree here, because I've done 2 video series on 3d5 recommending how to play against a Catalan and recommending the Vienna, so I would recommend 3d5. Even if you don't like my recommendations, I've always had the very strong feeling that 3d5 is the way to go there, and most of the world top, I believe, follows that. Agrees with that belief, I should say. They don't necessarily follow my beliefs. But of course, all the systems you mentioned are playable. It's a matter of taste. You could even add the Benoni on a crazy day. For me, d5 feels soundest. I don't enjoy the b6, g3 positions all that much. I don't enjoy bishop b4 check, knight bd2. Therefore, yeah, I'm willing to deal with the positions after d5. After knight c3, I play a lot of moves. And after d5, g3, just learn one system. Be it bishop e7, be it bishop b4 check, be it dc4. Just learn one and you'll be set for a bit. So that would be my honest recommendation. Who's next? Danny Dinar. Says, hey Jan, I play often against my dad. Hope you're crushing him. Even if I open with one e4 or one d4, he's responding it nearly every time with one b7 or g7. I guess you mean b6 or g6, followed by bishop b7 or bishop g7. At the end, his entire goal is to have both bishops in fianchetto. If that's his entire goal, first of all, it's a very humble goal. Secondly, yeah, you shouldn't be too scared of it. If you would know this, how would you exploit this information on the first move? Should I start with e4 or with d4? What are the main drawbacks of this line? Doesn't matter at all which one you start with, because you're gonna be allowed to do both anyway. Oh, that's praise. I should always read out the praise. Thank you for doing this great job, and please never stop again in your life playing Bento Blitz. I cannot get enough of this. Thanks, dude. I'm enjoying it too, but I might stop at some point in my life. Who knows? For now, the Bento Blitzes will keep coming. Oops, this is still the old board. We don't want the old board, we want the new board. So as I said, it doesn't matter at all if you go e4 or d4, because you're gonna play the move you didn't play next move anyway. Let's say he goes g6, d4, bishop g7, and now you have the information that he wants to go b6, bishop b7. I'd probably use it, but that's up for debate, to grab as much central space as possible. I'd play a system with c4, but that's because I'm a 1d4 player and I'm more used to such positions. Like there's even a bit of theory here. Normally, once they've done this, they go for these hippopotamus setups. And here, since I'm more used to it, I'm more comfortable having my pawn on c4 already. And white is better here. Just play natural moves, queen d2, put a rook in the middle, go d5, and white will be better. But you could also, if you're more of an e4 guy or more aggressively inclined, try to put an extra pawn on f4. Here b6 also strikes me as a rather unpleasant way or unpleasant position for black. So I would use that extra time to put a third pawn in the center. Of course, there's absolutely nothing wrong with just playing classically knight f3, knight c3. And yeah, any move that comes to mind, bishop e2, bishop c4, bishop d3, basically is forfeiting the opening, the fight for equality by going for this double fianchetto. And yeah, you're gonna have to learn to, if he's still beating you, to outsmart him later, but it's not a problem of his cunning opening choice. So best of luck beating your dad in the future. I think you'll get there, because you're more interested in opening theory than him. That's the impression I get from you asking this question. Who else has a question? Gior. Can you recommend a line for white against 1 e4, d6, d4, knight f6, knight c3, c6? I can do that. It's one of these trick lines that many of us, me included, are faced with in our upbringing, but it's not a very good line. So there's a couple ways, in my opinion, to get an advantage. But once again, I would go aggressive and I would go f4 here, since black is wasting a bit of time. Normally these c6 dudes, they feel very clever about playing queen a5 here, attacking the e4 pawn. Now there's a couple moves, but my favorite is the simple bishop d3, just defending e4. Black goes e5, you go knight f3, just develop, let him put his queen on a5. As much as he likes. Bishop g4, all of this is sort of, yeah, c6 dude's theory. Bishop g4, putting pressure on d4. Now you could move this pawn, but once again, I like just developing. Go bishop e3, defend this pawn. Knight bd7 is what they normally do. You castle. And white is just seriously better here. It's not a good line. Next move is going to be h3. Whatever black takes, doesn't matter. He's just forfeiting his only stronghold in the center. So normally they don't do that, but they go bishop e7. You go h3. If they take, it's just a pretty horrible position for black. Next on the agenda could be bringing this knight around, targeting f5, trying to provoke a weakness with g6. Here we have the two bishops in the center. We're seriously better. So in my opinion, black should at least go bishop h5. But even this is not a fun position at all for black. Many options here. g4 is a little too aggressive for my blood. So I'd probably once again go knight e2, tending to go knight g3. And white is just better, what can I tell you? That's what I would choose against the c6 system. There's other decent setups for sure, but this always struck me as the most direct punishment. f4 and just bishop d3, and white is better. Hope that helps. Who's next in line? Outreimer says, "Hey Jan, I want to learn the French defense from the black side. You've come to the wrong place." So my question is a bit general. What is your opinion about the Rubenstein variation against 392 and 393? 3d takes e4. I know that line is not so popular, but Georgmeier seems to play it regularly, so it can't be so bad. No, I don't think it's so bad. What are exactly the problems and drawbacks in this variation? So I hope you can give me your advice. I should learn the Rubenstein or some different main lines against 392 and 393. Sounds like you're still pretty early in your new opening choice, so maybe don't play the French. Is that an option? But everything's playable. It's a matter of taste. In my opinion, what is my opinion? My opinion, the Rubenstein is probably fine. I guess it's sound theoretically, but at a high level you need to know a lot of theory to survive different onslaughts from white, while white really doesn't have to know anything when he gets this position. It's going to be hard to prove an opening advantage, but at a slightly lower level. White doesn't have to know so much and can try all kinds of different things, while black has to be reasonably precise, trying to neutralize white's initiative. And of course that can be done, but it doesn't strike me as fun. So knight f3, knight f6. I'm honestly not an expert. Recently they've been taking and playing c3, and it seemed that, yeah, white gets some chances here. But once again, I haven't spent much time analyzing all this stuff. c5, bishop e3, bishop e7. I've seen some games recently with queen c2, bishop d3. So in general, yeah, it struck me as being harder to play with black, but it's not unhealthy per se, as far as I know. So if you're comfortable with these positions in general, like half-open position, we have to be careful, but you have a chance to organize some counterplay with c5. I don't think it's a terrible opening. And as I'm sure you're aware, the other French lines often lead to more close structures after e4, e5 by white. Well, the Rubenstein sort of is its own thing. It's more of a combination between, I don't know, positions that can arise from Caro-Kann structures, French structures, Sicilian structures, Scandinavian, so it's a little different. And yeah, I don't think either line is refuted. I'm not a fan of either. By either, I mean the Rubenstein or, let's say, knight f6 or bishop b4 here. But it depends what you want. You get a simplified game with the Rubenstein. You get a slightly more complex game with bishop b4 or knight to f6. And same, after knight d2, you can choose between bishop e7, c5, c5 ed, ed, c5 ed, queen d5. There's lots of options. And yeah, Rubenstein is not terrible. That's pretty much my answer, I guess. Do we have more questions? Oops, that's the wrong shot. The Saint or the SNT. Could mean Saint, could mean something else. Hi Jan, what is your recommendation for a Grunfeld player against d4, knight f6, knight f3, g6, bishop g5, bishop g7, knight d2? I've played 45 recently, since I don't want to allow white to go 5e4. After e3 I've tried c5, but I don't see a clear plan after c3. Also, how should I proceed if white takes on d5? Finally, I've played d5 because I don't want white to go e4, but I don't know if there is an alternative for black that still avoids the kind of positions that arise after d6, e4. Might be okay for black, but I feel uncomfortable there. Thanks for your amazing work at Chess24. Thank you, sir. What do I have to say? Do I have any words of wisdom? d4, knight f6, knight f3, g6, bishop g5, bishop g7, knight bd2. For starters, I think you can castle and keep your options open, because here after e4, or e4 as far as I know is not considered to be dangerous, you haven't touched your d-pawn, so you can, in true Grunfeld style, strike in the center immediately, go d5, after e5 there's knight e4. Not supposed to be any problem whatsoever. While, yeah, some dudes take, but then knight takes d5 is also fine. There you go, knight d7, c5, or b6, or whatever. It's a very Grunfeldeskian, I believe that's the correct term, position. So you shouldn't mind that. However, after knight bd2 castles, not all your problems are solved if white goes for c3 here. Then you still have to decide between d6 or d5. Personally, I'd go d6 because these positions after d5 always struck me as a little stale. Well, this d6, e4, c5, I believe is kind of okay for black. But it is a matter of taste, however. Yeah, here, I kind of hear you. I also wouldn't be sure what to play. Normally they go b6, bishop b7, c5, knight bd7, and take it from there. But it's a little dull of a position. So, yeah, I'd certainly start with castles, and then after c3, me personally, I'd go d6, but d5 followed by, this b6, bishop b7, c5, knight bd7, whatever, is certainly playable, and I don't think it's big edge for white or anything at all. So, yeah, not a problem I've been dealing with much. I don't think I've ever had that line on the board, but I'd go d6 if I had to. What else would I do? Far away from hell. That's probably a good place to be. Or maybe maybe there's a comma missing. Maybe he's far away, but he's from hell. I don't know. Hey Jan, what would you recommend after d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, d5, cd, ed, bishop g5, bishop b4? Are there options to get an opening advantage? It seems that normally will transpose back to Ragozin, where black is okay. How can I use the fact that my knight is still on g1? A lot of assumptions in there, but long story short, put your knight on e2. So how do we get there? d4, let's say knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, d5, takes. The Ragozin, as I'm sure you know, is knight f3, bishop b4, and the difference, as you mentioned, is his knight is already on f3. And that is a difference. So here, cd, ed, bishop g5, bishop b4. The point is his knight is not on f3 yet, so it can go to e2. And in the Ragozin, many black plans are based on quick counterplay against his knight with, let's say, c5, dc, queen a5. None of those lines make a lot of sense here. Okay, this is a particularly bad example, but knight e2 is very important in many a line. So I'm not quite sure what's bothering you or how you transpose to the Ragozin, because in my book, white is just better here already. e3, let's say knight bd7 is a typical Ragozin move. You just go bishop d3, and next move is knight ge2. And white has a very good position where the black play doesn't flow so easily. So I'm not quite sure what's bothering you, but long story short, go e3, put the bishop on d3, put the knight on e2, and you'll be better because there's no Ragozin counterplay against c3, and there's also the typical plan for later to play f3, e4, which is quite effective here. So I hope that helps. Mr. Dr. Boki, FIDE Master Dr. Boki. Been around for a long time here. What's up, Dr. Boki? He's saying, what is he saying? He's saying, hi Jan, thanks for your great work. Thank you, sir. I'm a big fan of Chess24. So am I. Nah, not really. That's a story for a different day. Do you have an idea for white in the Anti-Meran? Queen c2, bishop d6, bishop d3, castles, e5, exclamation mark. I do not. I'm feeling, Dr. Boki, that every opening clinic show you're asking some variety of question like give me ideas versus the semi-Slav. Or am I wrong about that? I have that feeling. Anyway, let's get to the position and spill some wisdom. e6, e3. By the way, I'm not sure if you've seen it, but I've talked a lot about this in my video, what's called Thailand Opening Clinic Special, something like that, because there I've played this a lot, and you can see that I have zero ideas about that line because I made a very uninspiring draw against Luke van Baarle here. So this position is a modern equalizer. It's mainly popular at Super GM level, so I'm not sure how worried I would be if I'm not facing a Super GM. But yeah, this is a very tough nut to crack. I'll give a little hint. I played knight d4. It didn't really get me anywhere. I think looking at b3 might be interesting, but black also equalizes if he's careful. But the more important thing is, if you want to play this line, but the move e5 is bothering you, you can just do what they've started doing. You just go bishop e2, because now, after castles, there is no more e5. Well, there is, but now white is better, because the bishop is better on e2 in a bunch of these lines here, after knight b5, for example. Bishop b8 takes. What do you do? Bishop d2. It's much nicer to have the bishop on e2, and white gets a bit of an edge. So after bishop d2, bishop e2, pretty much everybody captures here, and now you can play the line of your choice after dc4, bishop c4, which I guess is what you wanted since you played that system. So just play bishop e2, that's what they've converted to, and after castles, it doesn't look like black really has anything better than dc4. Hope that helps, but I still don't have ideas. Seems like a pretty decent opening. Who else do we have? Maybe we got nobody, maybe that's it, but I have a feeling this is not it yet. BWG. Hi Jan, I heard that the Benko Gambit is not completely correct. Who's telling you such things? Poisoning your mind. But I don't know why. So they just told you that? It's no good? But I'm not gonna say why. People these days. Can you explain it and say how bad the black position in the critical line is? Yes, I know my English is not the best, so I hope you understand my question. Your English is perfect, what are you talking about? It's probably better than my English. Benko Gambit. Sorry, I always have to switch back from the position in the line we had before. I don't allow the Benko much, but if I do, I'll take the pawn. And that's pretty much the current status quo. They believe in all these old lines that here after e4, white is a little better. Move orders are kind of interchangeable, but the big thing is that white started playing a4, either immediately here or after queen e2. I believe the main move is still this direct a4, and black's typical counterplay doesn't quite work, so black players got scared away a little. I'm not sure how bad it is, like here rook a6 strikes me as still some open questions. As an example, the old plan with queen a5 has sort of disappeared. Because bishop d2, rook b8, knight b5, queen c2, white just manages to keep everything under control and gets a pretty serious advantage. Still, rook a6 is, I believe, one possibility to maybe stick around for a little bit. The other thing they've been trying is to delay this bishop takes a6 and play this plan with very early g6, bishop g7. After e4, play queen to a5, trying to disrupt. I think they start with castles even. And then go for an early queen a5, trying to disrupt things. There's some theoretical discussions here. I'm not sure how much I believe in black's cause recently. Some weird lines have become topical, like bishop e2, queen a5, bishop d2. And it looks to me like white is better here. But that's the state of events in the Benko. White is a little better theoretically. Then again, I feel there's still some unanswered questions in this main line. And a bit of it might be trend as well. Me, I like my pawns, so it's never been a favorite of mine, but it's a reasonably easy setup to play, and I believe that's what scared away these creatures of habit black Benko players who want to play the same plan they always play. Queen a5, rook b8, knight e8, knight c7, and that doesn't really work against a4. So you might have to find a fresh plan here. Rook a6, queen a8 currently seems to be the favorite to me. And yeah, I wouldn't play it, but it's not as bad as people say. That's at least what I currently believe. What else do we have? We have a question by Mohammad Saeed, but he's not premium. Sorry, buddy, can't answer that. Oof, then we have an essay here. Are you premium? Yeah, it's by Yuxu. Dear Grandmaster Jan Gustafsson, that is the correct way to address me. My main weapon against 1d4 has quite long been the French defense. However, recently I've somehow lost my interest in belief in the French. Against weaker opponents, they always have the possibility to go for the rather drawish exchange variation, and against stronger opponents, I've struggled in achieving playable positions in the mainline and the Tarrasch. It doesn't leave a lot of it. So I've been making a switch to 1e5. Surprisingly for me, it seems that all the gambits and also the more respectable tries, such as the Roux Lopez, the Italian and the Scotch, can be met with quite natural moves, hence not requiring huge amounts of theory memorized, which I have considered as the main drawback of 1e5. Yeah, it is a similar experience. I played a lot of trash through my junior years. No, not all of it trash, but I played a bit of Najdorf, bit of Caro-Kann, a lot of 1g6, bit of Khan, bit of Taimanov, and never really found home. I was always trying to fix some holes to my mind. When I switched to 1e5 when I was around, I don't know, I was 20 maybe, things improved and it felt like, yeah, you could just make natural moves. And I had the feeling I'd found home. Maybe it's time to expand my horizons a little bit and move away from e5 or play a bit more Sicilian, but I had the same feeling that one doesn't need to learn that much theory to deal with the sidelines, and still one can get good positions. Anyway, after the long preparation, I also have a question for you. I think it was in one of your Banter Blitz videos where you said that you had promised to your first coach to never play the French defense with black. Of course, I understand that this was said a bit tongue-in-cheek, but I guess there's also some kind of real reasoning behind this. Do you find that playing the French could somehow hinder the development of a young player due to the somewhat similar structures that arises from the opening? Or is that the ideas and plans in the French are difficult and unnatural to the beginner? Or do you find the opening is a bit unsound compared to, for example, 1e5 Sicilian or the Caro-Kann? Unsound in the sense that it's quite rarely seen in the utmost top-level games. Yeah, I'm not sure my probably I was 11 or 12-year-old self had all these deep thoughts when I promised, not sure if I promised, but I said I'd never play the French. But it is very true that, yeah, my first coach was not a big fan of the French and he was always eager to teach everybody how to crush it. But I do kind of agree with most of your statements. I actually think nowadays that the French, with all this hatred I'm spewing, I think it's actually an interesting opening, and most of the main lines are extremely sharp, be it these Wiener lines. But yeah, it's kind of, especially for beginners and in chess circles when I grew up, these French players had a certain image, or a certain image was projected with it, of like playing these close structures that, yeah, we didn't think was cool. I don't think it's fault of the French opening per se, but that's the environment I grew up in, and I think I'll be fine the rest of my chess life without playing the French. But I don't think it's a bad opening. I do think that 1e5 and the Najdorf are the kings of openings, and therefore the most popular at the top level, but I don't think the French is unsound per se. It's interesting, but it does give up a little space. You're not fighting for the center on move 1, so it should be a little inferior to e5 or c5 that don't allow 2d4. Okay, a lot of philosophy, but welcome to 1e5 camp. Hopefully it'll serve you well. Then we have Mr. McFly. Probably not Marty McFly, but still pretty fly for a white guy. If he is white, I don't know that. He says, "Hi Jan, I love your shows. My question, in the martial attack, which I only play from the white side, after c6, I like to go 12 bishop takes d5. Yeah, don't do that. Because I reckon that this eliminates an important black attacker, gives black an isolated pawn, and gets me a step closer to the desired endgame, a pawn up. With all those good reasons, why is bishop d5 not the main line and also not the favorite of the engines? Thanks. It's not a very good move. That is the simple answer. Let's try to find that position. So we go e4, then you go e5, knight f3, knight c6, not knight c3, bishop b5, a6. Good old Marshall. The problem with bishop d5 is you're giving up a lot. You're giving up a bishop against a knight. It sounds dumb, but it's a good developed bishop against a knight that wasn't that effective yet. And also after cd5, you're sort of repairing black's structure. Black is a pawn down, but the pawn is down are these 3 pawns against these 4 white pawns. And it's pretty much impossible, or almost impossible, to win any endgame. Let's say you reach your dream and endgame a pawn up, we exchange all the heavy pieces, and we're left with the 2 bishops versus this knight and this bishop. All these endgames are drawn. The knight has a very hard time even attacking this pawn, and black normally holds with reasonable ease. So that's the worst case scenario for black, but it's not that bad because those are extremely drawish. And secondly, black still has some chances to build up an attack here now that this bishop is missing and black has added central control. I once won a nice game against Mr. Alexander Graf, very strong compatriot from this position. So yeah, bishop d5 is not a good move. Play d3, that is the critical test of the knight of the marshal, and it will give you much better chance to reach a slightly better endgame that you're dreaming of than bishop takes d5. I'm not sure if that explanation made enough sense, but I've played these positions often enough. It's bishop d5 does not scare any marshal player almost ever. That's maybe a bit of a stretch, but not that much of a stretch. One thing you learn about the marshal, bishop d5 almost never a threat. What's Chicago Dave up to? Dear Jan, I like to play dynamic counter-attacking positions with black. Don't we all? Nah, I don't actually. Against 1d4, this usually means Benko, Benoni, the occasional Grunfeld. I don't play the King's Indian defense. My question is simple. What can I do to unbalance the game against tedious plotters like yourself who play 1d4, knight f6, knight f3? Yeah, don't you hate these people playing solid chess with white? I don't really trust c5, d5, b5, bishop g5. I'm not sure if that line is so bad, by the way, but yeah. And the Slav is too tame. Is there a good punching option I should investigate with 2e6? A Bogo or Ragozin or something? Please advise. Your friend from the Netherlands, Chicago Dave. It is surprising he's from the Netherlands, but I called it early. I am not sure I understood your problem, Mr. Dave, though, because d4, knight f6, knight f3, e6, c4. You go c5, right? And after d5 you can play the counter-attacking Blumenfeld or the more tedious modern Benoni, and you should be feeling right at home. Actually, I think Benoni nerds would tell me, no, the more precise move order is d6 and then knight c3, d5, yeah, whatever. So you can do that. Of course, nerds like me, we might play knight c3, but this is a position as a Benoni c5 overall dude you want to learn anyway, so you might have to do that. And also it's quite complicated, so it's not that boring. And else, yeah, they can do like annoying stuff like bishop f4, bishop g5, I'll grant that. That's why I normally go d5. But here you also have to deal with a lot of boring openings like the Catalan. So it's tough. I would stick with e6, try to get in c5. Like, I wouldn't in a million years, of course, but if I had a liking for your opening family, I'd go for e6 followed by c5. And else, yeah, here, plenty of sharp lines. Semi-Slav's pretty sharp, Vienna kind of sharp, Ragozin kind of sharp. One can do all these things, but I think you'd feel unhappy with so much central control. Doesn't sound like it's your cup of tea to have a pawn here. Anyway, greetings to Chicago. And hope that advice was useful. Speedster. In your opinion, what is the best opening to play against the French defense? A lot of French interest today. What is my opinion on that? I think we have to differentiate. My opinion is that knight c3 should be the best move. It feels like the best move, right? It's developing towards the center, leaving all the pieces open. But I would, of course, play knight d2 because it's more practical. It doesn't allow all these sharp systems, bishop b4, or even knight f6. There's so much to learn. And knight d2 always struck me as, yeah, more in my style. Of course, black has a big choice here too. c5, a6, bishop e7, knight f6, h6, and whatever else they do. But I would play knight d2. Objectively, the best I would think is knight c3. But knight d2 would be more my style. And it seems like it's still playable. It's still out there. Not sure if that was a very consistent answer. But that's how I feel. You Can't tell me how to feel. Robin Nilsson, 94, is saying, hey Jan, I'm wondering about what you think of the position arising after e4, c5, knight f3, knight c6, or knight c3, knight c6, same thing, knight f3, e5 for black. And if you think that e5 is an okay reply to knight f3. Thanks for the feedback and, as usual, for providing us with your sublime, that's a big word, content. Thanks, Robin Nilsson. Yeah, I think e5 is fine. Once again, it's a bit of a difference between objective evaluation, where I think it's perfectly fine, and I probably would not play it because I don't enjoy positions with permanent weaknesses. Like here the d5 square is a permanent weakness. However, I think practice and super grandmasters and all these things have shown that the position is perfectly playable for black. If white goes about business naively, as I probably would, by, oh, let's say knight f6, same thing, by bringing this knight around, it seems like black gets decent play. Like I've seen some stuff like this. Black avoids exchanges here and just plays around it, puts the bishop on e6 and then g5 and is fine. There's some more theory where I'm not 100% up to date, but last time I checked, no, I guess you can start with castles in this move already even. Black was fine. So I think it's playable opening. I wouldn't do it just for psychological reasons because I wouldn't like staring at this hole in my position. But a lot depends here what your normal repertoire is. If you're a Sveshnikov player, you can think about going knight f6, but you gotta be ready for bishop b5. If you're a dragon player, you probably want to go g6. If you're a Najdorf player, you wouldn't have played 2 knight c6. So I guess it depends a little on your typical repertoire or on your normal Sicilian repertoire. But I do think that 3e5 is a perfectly fine move. Mr. Koval saying, hi Jan, which move order would you recommend to get a Scheveningen headshot formation but avoid both Kara's attack and the 3 bishop b5 lines? Taimanov seems a way to get a headshot, but it has a drawback that bishop f4 forces e6 bishop f4 forces e6 e5. I would feel very uncomfortable with a hole on d5. I hear ya. I think I more or less said the same thing about the last question. Or maybe there's a way to avoid losing the pawn without moving e6, e5. No, there is not. And if you reach this position on the diagram here, you gotta go e6, e5. Thank you in advance for any tips. First of all, sometimes I think you gotta be, oops, that was the wrong button. That sometimes happens. Sometimes I think you gotta be pragmatic. And how do we get here? Let's say you're happy with all the other lines, but this is really bothering you. And I would say 2 things. This line does not have a good reputation, so I don't think you're very likely to face it more than every 100th game you're playing with the Taimanov, which is not such a big reason to avoid it. And you just study up a bit on this, where, as far as I know, black is supposed to be perfectly fine. I don't know what the current trend is, but bishop g5, bishop e6, for example. As far as I know, black is fine, even though, as I said, I hear you with the permanent weakness thingy. But it wouldn't be a big reason for me to avoid it, because you just wouldn't get it very often. And as you mentioned, it's very hard to get everything, to avoid the Kara's attack, to avoid bishop b5 systems. So to be scared off by this very little played line would be a bit much. You might want to check Robin van Kempen's video series. I'm not sure what he recommends against bishop f4, but it's not considered to be a great move. Then again, to answer the question, if you're happy with any kind of Scheveningen headshot structure, you might have better chances to get one with a6. Because, yeah, against pretty much whatever white does here, bishop d3, you can either play knight f6 and d6, or you can play one of these weird systems where you go bishop e7, and then you can play d6 sooner rather than later. Against c4, which I consider the most critical, you can play a system like this, and sooner or later you'll have your headshot setup, even though I prefer white here, but that's a different story. And against knight c3, there's also plenty d6 based systems, like I used to play b5, bishop d3, d6. I'm not sure how great a reputation that has, But in most systems here, your pawn is going to end up on d6. So the Khan might, if this bishop f4 really bothers you that much, the Khan might be another way towards your goal. But I wouldn't feel it necessary. The Taimanov is, in general, a slightly better opening, and this knight b5, bishop f4 is nothing you're going to face very often, or that should cause you sleepless nights. Wrong button again. Focus, Jan. We can do this. Moriarty. I always mispronounce that one. It's... I'm sure I've Googled even the same question before. Goes to show that I'm old and senile. I still don't know if the Holmes villain is written with an I or without an I. I think it's without an I. Yeah, that's what always confused me. Professor Moriarty is without the I. So I'm not sure what Moriarty is about. But let's still not ignore his question. Hi Jan, I'm trying to move to 1 d4, 2 c4 opening repertoire as white. Welcome. At the moment I'm having problems with the Slav Defense. We all do. I'm considering playing the line d4, d5, c4, c6, knight f3, knight f6 for queen b3. Do you think there's a good way to play for white? And what is black's best response? If not, could you suggest an alternative way to play for an advantage against the Slav? Thanks. Yeah, I think when it comes to sidelines, that's not a bad choice. I believe it gives white a playable position with not that much effort, or not that much lines one has to study. Not that many, right? Whatever. You guys understand what I'm talking about. So I think it's kind of alright. As for what the best line is, I don't know. I played this with black, and I believe this is still the main line. When, yeah, currently white is trying knight b2. It's a bit passive, but it's stopping. Obviously, any knight takes f3. Set up the funnier lines are knight c3, knight bd7, e4. Now, let's say e5. But those, yeah, are currently considered to be fine for black. Even though one can always innovate. And yeah, if this is the best line for black, or if bishop f5 is the best line, I don't know. The current fashion is bishop g4, not bishop f5. For other lines to play for an advantage, yeah, I'm not reinventing the wheel here. Knight c3 is probably the best move. Disadvantages, you have to be ready for e6, tc4, and a6. But it's a pretty good move. Develops the knight towards the middle of the board. And another way to play for an advantage here, without having to learn oceans of theories, e3, more positional setup, where normally white finds a way to grab the two bishops and exploit that. It's not going to be easy, but the main lines are bishop f5, knight c3, e6, knight h4, and then we grab this bishop, or bishop g4, where white typically goes h3, and black either takes, or bishop h5, then they go for something like this, and still often manage to get a hold of this bishop. So those are the other ways to play for an advantage, but they're more work than for queen b3. What else do we have? Did I leave out any questions? I see some complaints, I think. Oh, I forgot Mr. Oh yeah, I did forget a couple questions here. I'll get to them. Apologies. I did answer the French defense question. Here's more. Klopp saying, "Hi Jan, I play the Prix with black. I used to play 5c5 as an answer to the so-called Austrian attack. That's the line after 4f4. Do you mean 5c5 or do you mean 4c5? Klopp. The lines that follow are usually very complex with a lot of ramifications. I just can't recall them. Is there a lazy man's alternative on move 5 for black, which is solid and confined and gives black the opportunity to play for a win? Because that's what we want to do. Let's see. So e4, d6, d4, knight f6, knight c3, g6, 4 f4, bishop g7, knight f3, and c5. This, as you mentioned, is what you want to avoid because there's a lot of sharp lines after dc, bishop b5 check, e5, whatnot. I understand. The main alternative is to castle. When, yeah, it depends what white is gonna do, but they mainly play bishop d3 here. And knight a6 is supposed to be the most reliable here. You want to prepare c5, but you don't want to go c5 immediately because they would take. Therefore, knight a6, castles, c5, white normally goes d5, and a complex struggle lies ahead after bishop g4. With chances to play for a win, for a loss, for a draw, all these results without having to know all that much theory. I'm sure there's more theory here, but that is a line you can play without studying all that much. Hope you will find great success with knight a6. The other move here I think is knight c6, but I don't like it as much. What else do we have? Mr. Miktal is saying, "Hi Jan, what's the best way for black to play against the Grand Prix attack in the Sicilian? e4, c5, knight c3, knight c6, f4. I don't know, it's nothing that ever really bothered me. As far as I know, both e6 and g6 are fine. So I think it's more didactically valuable to recommend g6 because it's sort of more typical play for these positions. Just go bishop g6, bishop g7. After bishop c4, black plays e6, followed by knight e7 and d5 pretty much. All these f5 lines are kind of nonsense. They don't really work. Just go knight e7 anyway. So that's a good system for black. Bishop b5 is all the rage. Here black has to know that he has to go knight d4. Or has to is a bit strong, but should go knight d4. When I'm not sure what the current theory discussions are. I guess castles is still the main line, and in my days I used to take on b5. I still have a hard time believing that's bad. But also a6 followed by d6 seems to equalize. Takes, knight e2, knight f6, and I don't understand why black should be worse here. So that's fine. And as far as I know, but I haven't spent much time here, e6, knight f3, d5 is also fine. The problem is these positions are a little more unnatural and you can get crushed here quickly if you don't know exactly what you're doing. But as far as I know, this is also a good way to play. But yeah, I go g6, bishop g7 and enjoy life. One little thing I gotta do, hang on. Nope, that wasn't it. Here we are. So I hope I'm back on track without having forgotten anybody. Where do we end? Harter chess player. I had this position recently on board and I wondered that I could just play for a draw with white and for not anything more than that, because I had the double pawns and no compensation for it. The position of white looks pretty without prospects and with no advantages. Can you give any advice for better chances for white or any two-edged positions, double-edged positions? The position, d4, knight f6, knight f3, e6, c4, b6, bishop f4, bishop b7, knight c3, bishop b4, e3, castles, bishop e2, knight e4, queen c2, f5, castles, knight c3, bc, bishop e7. Yeah, I'm not sure I agree. It's that terrible for white, but something has probably gone a little wrong if you get these double pawns without great compensation. Still, I think it's not that bad. Anyway, let me just... Oops, sorry. You guys aren't supposed to see this. I almost saw something very secretive. Nah, not really. I just gotta restart my little program here and open this. This can only take hours. Okay. Here we go again. And we're back. The problem is I forgot everything about your question in the meantime, but hopefully we'll get there. Ah no, it was the double pawns thingy. How do we get to that position? It was here, b6, f4, check, knight c3. Ah no, it was here first, knight c3, bishop b4, e3, castles, and bishop e2. You should go bishop d3 here. That's, I believe, given that move order, the most important thing. Now knight e4 is less good. First of all, it runs into castles probably. When there's some tricks, not sure that's very relevant theoretically, but who doesn't enjoy a little bishop h7 trick, which should be good for white. King h7, knight g5, king somewhere, queen c2. Queen h5 wins on the spot, sorry. Queen c2 is cuter because it threatens this, but queen h5 just wins. So there are some tricks here. Knight g5, if king g6, then this looks pretty effective. And bishop d3 makes life a little harder for black. Still, of course, black's position is not ridiculous. You can, for example, take and play bishop e4 here. It's a complicated position, but it strikes me as an improvement compared to bishop e2. And else, you've chosen a very complicated strategic setup, especially if these double pawns bother you. Just play g3 here and you won't have to live with double pawns in any line after bishop b4. You can always go bishop d2. Therefore, I believe that's probably the way to avoid that situation you found yourself in, which you didn't enjoy. I hope that helps. Stephen Curry 30 saying, "Hi Jan, recently I've been facing a lot of lower rated players that play the Scotch 4 knights as white. I know these guys, lower rated players club, going for this dull position on the diagram. I'm a martial player and I find these positions very dull and easy to play for white, so almost all my games in this line have featured draws with near engine play for white. Even that, I've tried to pick up the Sicilian and even the Petrov to avoid that line. This might be a first, someone picking up the Petrov to avoid dull lines, but I do hear you. But do you have any suggestions for how to spice up this line with black or how to avoid entirely without a massive repertoire upheaval? Thanks for the great content." Yeah, I've been dealing with the same problem, and frankly, most of the times I've been too lazy to go to great length to avoid it, so I've made a couple draws, like in my case against 2450, 2500 types, and which, yeah, I wasn't thrilled about, but also didn't strike me as the end of the world. However, there are some options. Like, if you're very adventurous, you can play g6 here. Not a great move, but it's more or less ensures a fight. And after knight f6, d4, ed, knight d4, one line that I play quite regularly after takes to bishop d3 is this line which I've seen Levan Aronian play a couple times. You go rook e8 here and wait a bit before determining the situation in the center. After queen f3, Levan does this goofy bishop d6 followed by bishop e5, only then d5, hoping to get in some d5 bishop g4 play. It's not exactly winning, but it leads to a more complex position than the ones you mentioned in the main lines. Even this stuff here, d6, is a little more double-edged. So I believe that is one way to do it. And another way to do it, once again, also played by Levan, who seems to share your hatred for this line, is the move bishop c5. This, I believe, is my current favorite if I want to avoid the main line, which, as I mentioned, I don't always want to. It's still a chess position, and it's not a dead draw, so normally I'll just roll with the main line. But this is a playable line. The only way to really punish this, bishop c5, bishop b6, is to play very aggressively with queen d2 followed by long castles, which normally goes against the instincts of these guys to play the 4 knights Scotch, because they normally want a very solid, easy to play position. Here after queen d2, recently people have dabbled with knight g4. This leads to a pretty double-edged play, and is, I believe, a decent compromise between not going too crazy and getting an interesting position against our low-rated opponent who plays the Scottish 4 knights. And yeah, I play the Sicilian a lot against low-rated opponents, so often that rules it out. But I've certainly been there, especially at this, yeah, in my case, sweet spot where I don't want to go too crazy, but I want to play for a win, like between 24 and 2500. It is a tricky spot to be in, but I hope that gave you some options. Mr. Spills. Hey Jan, after the move, c4, e5, g3, knight f6, bishop g2, bishop c5, knight c3, d6, e3, knight c6, knight g2, castles. We have a popular line of the English Opening, where black's setup seems reliable and easy to play. But yeah, I'll go with that premise. Question, can this position be played with the pawn on c6 instead of the knight? Example, c4, e5, and so on, e3, c6, knight g2, knight b7, castles, etc. I like this for black. I might go h5 next, but I was surprised to find that no strong players are playing this way. Is there some drawback to having a pawn on c6 instead of the knight? I don't really understand why this hasn't been tried more often. Please help. Thanks. First of all, I do like the creativity, so kudos for that. Secondly, as usual, I'll be skeptical with fresh ideas, because all the good stuff has already been invented. It's like with movies. Does that make any sense? Nah. Anyway, how do we get here? Bishop c5, let's say, knight c3. Ah no, you don't want to castle, you want to keep this h5 option. So d6, let's say, e3, c6, knight e2, knight b, d7. Well, first of all, white is not forced to castle either, especially knowing that you want to go for h5. But the setup, it's a little unsound. I'll go d4. You more or less have to go bishop b6 here. With this formation, you can't really give up the center, so you want to go bishop b6. Now I can still delay castles and go for soft spot in your position with b3, bishop a3, which strikes me as extremely unpleasant. And yeah, I think this is a bad position. Black's position is not fully harmonious because I have this target and I haven't committed to any weaknesses. It's quite different from, let's play the normal line. Oh no, sorry. Something like this if white goes d4, because here even like, I don't know what's theory, probably you start with bishop b6 and don't take so early, but here you always have piece play against the center and you can follow up with bishop f5, intending to either go queen d7, bishop h3, or very often rook e8, knight e4 as well. So this is a very different situation from the one with the pawn on c6, where you have zero piece pressure against the center. And therefore, I don't think it quite works, even though it's a sneaky idea, but especially this early d4 followed by b3, or I don't know, I think about b4 too, but b3, bishop a3 strikes me as a very unpleasant plan. So I guess that's the reason why we don't see it more often. Sorry for being so negative all the time. That's how I roll. Who else is around? S.R. Chernik. Hi Jan, I need your help with the English Opening. Another English question. I usually don't have so much problem with it, but it's kind of annoying to not know it. I can relate to that. Can you recommend me something easy to play against the English? I usually play c4, knight f6 in case the opponent plays d4 or something like that. But if he goes c4, knight f6, knight c3, I like playing e5. What do you think about it? Thanks and greets from Argentina. Yeah, many world-class players do share your belief on that move order. So I have zero beef with it. Doesn't sound like it's gonna solve all your problems, because it's, as you said, it's a bit annoying not to know anything. But this knight f6 and then only to go e5 after knight c3 actually has some sound reasons, because after d4 you play whatever opening you normally play. And if they go g3, now you can play c6 followed by d5, which is a nice bonus option to have. So normally guys that wait for knight c3 to play e5, they want to play systems with bishop b4, like knight f3, knight c6, g3, bishop b4. It's a bit out of fashion because Viciano lost a couple games, but I'm sure it can be redeemed, so this is a playable system. I've always said that in my opinion, the main line and the best setup for black are these systems, where you go d5, put your knight on b6, and I've never seen any games that made me believe, oof, white really has an edge there, and I should start playing this more often with white. So I believe if you start from scratch and you have to learn one system, this is the one I'd go for. It's not, many people say, but I don't want to play the dragon with colors reversed, the tempo down. It's always different with colors reversed. It's not the same playing experience. Often in the dragon, for example, black would be happy as black to go for d4 or d5 with black, simplifying the position. Well, playing with d3, bishop e3, d4 here. Yeah, you just simplify and you equalized. So it doesn't really play the same way. And I always felt like this was the way to go. And recently at top level, they've been doing this a ton as well, without running into any problems in, where was it, Sinkfield? Yeah, I recall some games like Svidler. So Svidler got absolutely nothing. So Topalov, he got absolutely nothing. I'm sure there were more. But in general, yeah, I've always thought that's the best system. Oops. Taste your lose. Says, hi Jan, like you, I have my problems against King's Indian. After d4, blah, 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 h3, e5, d5, knight h5, g3. Can you help me understand this arising position and show some ideas lines here? Not really. I've never played this with either color and I've never shown any interest in that position, or I've never studied it, is what I'm trying to say, because it's not a structure that attracts me from either side of the board. However, it is a popular system, so I don't want to discourage you from playing it. Tomaszewski is doing very good work there for white. I won't be joining that team, and I won't be of much help to you, because I don't really have a clue. So how does it go? Knight h5, g3. Black has many moves here, but I don't understand a lot of things about this. Grishuk has been playing queen e7 consistently, a move I don't get. I get queen e8, trying to prepare f5, but queen e7 is already way over my head. This is another position I'm not quite sure what to think about, knight h4 or knight g5, but recently they've been trying knight h4, knight f6, bishop g5, and yeah, I don't know. I guess, yeah, this position I can sort of relate to. White should be a little better, even though it's very weird as well. But yeah, here the idea is to, well, get play against these pawns and force one of them to advance. And then use the resulting weaknesses to do damage. After f4, the light squares will be very weak. And after e4, these squares will be very weak. So I guess that's kind of the plan. What else is there? a5, I think, is what they normally do, right? And here, yeah, all these knight h2 weirdnesses are way too subtle for me, so I don't get that. I've seen recently Mr. Tomaszewski, he played bishop g5 here, right? And there you can see, yeah, I don't really have a clue, so I can't help you out that much with the plans. Like, I get knight h2 is directed against f5, but it's such a goofy looking move. So if this is good for white or not, I'm not sure. I just develop with black. Knight a6, put the knight on c5. If bishop e2, I guess you go back, since white has done enough creepy stuff himself. And yeah, you can see, I'm not very much into the details. It's certainly a playable system. Study Tomaszewski's games, but I won't be of that much help, I'm afraid. Sorry. Mohammed Saeed wrote a long text again, but he's not a premium member. There's not much I can do for you. I'm so sorry. Yuxu, another long essay. But I've been here already. Why am I... This is weird. I do think that I started from the bottom. Anyway, I do have the excellent judgment of knowing which questions I've already answered. Therefore, I'll get to the ones I haven't answered. But I'm still very confused. And apologies for... Apologies for the confusion. I don't know what's going on here. It's all a mystery, but I've answered all these questions. Let's see if I can get to one I haven't answered yet. I was here. Maybe it just jumped. Sir Chernik. This is a question we just talked about. Also, I forgot to add, is what to do when in the King's Indian. Nah, but that's a different question. It's only one question per user. Sorry, Sir Chernik, but I'm sure you understand we have too many questions already. I'm trying to get through all of them, or at least through as many of them as I can. So let's get to Mr. Normal Name. Hi Jan, I've just started playing the 6 Queen C2 Anti-Meran variation with white. You should team up with your boy Dr. Boki. But I don't know that much theory or the typical ideas for both sides. So you don't know anything, you just started playing it. Which I'm not necessarily against. Could you please give me your brief opinions on either the best way to play for an advantage against the major black options or the lines that are the most positional? I don't know what lines are the most positional. Also, general ideas and players to study in this line would be much appreciated. Thanks and keep up the great work for Chess24. Theo, thanks Theo, I shall try my best. Yeah, you might have heard what I've said earlier in reply to the Dr. Boki question, so there's a little something for you already. Then you might want to watch this show I also mentioned, this opening clinic special by yours truly on the Thailand Open 2016, where I played all this stuff a lot and I talked about my knowledge of some details, or lack of knowledge of some details. As for, the main black move here is bishop d6. Some guys go b6, but no reason to lose a lot of sleep. As for the most positional, I'm not sure what that means, but maybe the slowest line is, or the most maneuvering line is to play b3 here, castles, bishop e2. Important to start with bishop e2, because bishop b2, e5 is supposed to be fine for black. So b3 castles, bishop e2. Normally black goes b6, castles, bishop b7, bishop b2. And we get a very slow positional, maneuvering-y position, which can be played. It's not scary for black, but it's very playable for both sides. So I think that's the most positional. Else, for bishop d3, which is the main line, or bishop e2, which is a cute attempt to get to the main lines. Check out the other stuff. Then there's crazy lines like g4 or e4. Well, they're very different types of crazy, or bishop d2 and long castles. But it doesn't sound like those are to your liking. So if you want something without a lot of knowledge, we can just play go b3, bishop e2, bishop b2, castle, and take it from there. Goldfinger 772. Hi Jan, I really like the way you describe opening ideas. Thanks. Normally I say there are no ideas, just play good moves. Play that move, that move. One really gets to know in which direction to try and steer the game. Could you recommend me something after d4, knight f6, bishop f4, g6, e3 for the black side? Keeping in mind that I'm a Grunfeld player. Thanks and regards. I don't know if I can. I'm gonna read the keeping in mind that I'm a Grunfeld player as a clue towards don't put my pawns on d6 and e5. Since I'm a Grunfeld player, I don't want any King's Indian business. But then, since you're already indicating you want your pawn on d5, if I'm reading that clue correctly, may I suggest not starting with 2g6. Your pawn's already committed to bishop f4, so it's not like you can move already into unfamiliar territory after d5. If you need to learn a system here anyway, I'd go d5, e3, c5. And play this stuff. There's a bit of stuff to be learned, and this is growing more popular. But I feel as a Grunfeld player, you're probably going to be happy with your pawn on d5 anyway. And here there's no particular need to go g6, bishop g7, because against this formation, this bishop really doesn't have that much work on this diagonal. So I play this, and here play one of the solid moves, like bishop f5, e6, and use your bishop for the good cause on this side of the board. Bishop f5 is one playable line, c, d, e, d. Bishop f5 is another. There's a bit more to know, like bishop d3 could be a move. Well, not. I think you can go bishop g4, but this is worth looking into. And what else is there? Knight f3, then the trendy line has always been queen b6, but there's nothing wrong with c, d, e, d, bishop g4 or bishop f5 either. So I would look in that direction if I was you. Because if you say, I want to play g6, but I'm a Grunfeld player, which I'm reading as I want to go d5, then yeah, I think you're just limiting your options. One setup I'm sure is playable, I'm not sure how much it's been played, but is always this double fianchetto here with b6, bishop b7. That normally also requires you to go d6, knight bd7, and then either c5 or e5 at a later stage. So there's many playable setups, but I would probably go to d5 if I was you. Why do I keep doing this? Who's next? Bill 1226 saying, Jan, against 1d4 as black, I prefer the triangle system. Looks like a Sopiko Gramishvili fan who did a video series about the triangle system, d5, c6, e6. Against 1c4, can you effectively play for the triangle with e6, d5, etc., or are there some tricks that white can use to move order black into an uncomfortable variation? Could you briefly describe the most relevant move orders that a black triangle player should be aware of when facing 1c4? Thanks. Not sure I understand the question, because I'm not 100% sure what you triangle guys are up to in your spare time. Obviously, the difference is that white doesn't have a pawn on d4 yet. No one can stop you from going e6 followed by d5 and c6 against everything you want. So most of you should have covered like knight c3, d5, you're back in your territory. The only line that could potentially bother you, I guess, is something like this, where you can play c6, but I'm not sure if you want that after whatever. I don't know, I guess this is d4 is still your triangle repertoire, but I don't know what could get you out of book here, since I don't know what your book is. I haven't read the Triangle Bible. Queen c3, Queen c2, knight f3, or something like that, or maybe knight f3 here. Such things, yeah. I normally prefer, well, but I'm not a triangle player, to not commit to c6 so early and play knight f6 here. And have that be my repertoire. But I guess that's about it when it comes to your triangling the knight f3, g3, or g3, bishop g2. It's probably the steepest challenge out there, I'm guessing, but I'm really not sure what kind of crazy things triangle people are comfortable with and what they're uncomfortable with. So yeah, not sure if that helped you all that much. Sorry about that, but that's how I feel. MDRS is saying, Hi Jan, I'm studying the Khan these days and I was wondering, what do you recommend to play against 4c4? I recommend to play 4c4 against the Khan, and I don't really recommend the Khan. So yeah, do you think black is facing serious problems in the line which was played by Carlsen against Anand in the World Championship? I do. I think that's a bad line. Thanks and keep up the good work. I shall try, but I'm afraid part of it is being honest and saying, while not a specialist, I do consider that a problem for you Khansters. And I would probably not know how to answer the question differently. So a6, c4, yeah, this was out of fashion for a long time because people thought bishop b4 here was okay. But this queen d3 seems to have seriously changed that judgment. White is better here. Therefore, people, I guess, will move back to queen c7 after a3, play some hedgehoggy positions, where I prefer white, but of course there is a whole game of chess ahead, and if you don't hate yourself too much playing these sort of setups, I guess that would be my fix. But my real fix is not playing the Khan. So I'm sorry I can't help you out that much there. But yeah, if I was forced to play the Khan, I would go for this queen c7 and a3, b6 play. Some sort of hedgehog. Who is next? We have Mr. Howard. Oops, sorry, I clicked the wrong button again. But at least we get a very nice, what's this, Navarra versus Weyi picture. Not sure what that does in here, but always interesting to see. So thanks for stopping by, guys, and back to business. Howard 1001 says, Tanya Sachdev lost the game today, Sunday, August 21, in a London system, like position, except that the white bishop, queen's bishop was on g5, not f4. Here was the position after white's fourth move. I hear ya. She still played the black side a lot like I play against the London system, with a queen's knight on c6 and with b6 and bishop b7. However, to challenge white's queen's bishop, I never thought in such terms. It's fascinating, this queen's knights, queen's bishop stuff. She put a king's bishop on e7, which really gummed up her whole position. I missed that game by Tanya. She did not have counterplay when white launched a kingside attack with a knight on e5 and his queen KMP, king's knight pawn. Is that some old English notation kind of thing? I don't really know that one. King's bishop and king's rook involved. Poor Tanya. I think this could happen even if white's queen's bishop started out on f4, then moved to g5 in response to a black challenge from d6. What kind of developmental plan for black would he come up with in this situation? I haven't seen the game as mentioned, so I can only imagine the horrors that arose on that king side. But let's go to the position you put on the screen. In general, I normally don't like playing these setups with e6, bishop e7, knight c6, b6, bishop b7, even though I have a feeling they're fine. They played a lot on top level, but I've always been of the school of thought that if white already goes passive here with c3, why not try to develop my bishop early? So I would probably go something like knight e4, bishop f4, knight c6 here, knight d2, bishop f5, and try to play with the bishop outside of the pawn chain. Or there's similarly spirited ideas, like a knight c6 here, bishop f6, gf wouldn't bother me. And then after knight d2, let's say takes, and bishop f5. So all of that stuff strikes me as more pleasant than going for e6, b6 sort of setups. And yeah, I'm not sure that's the answer you wanted to hear. But if given this position, I would choose between knight e4, knight c6, or queen b6. I'd probably go knight e4. So tempting to attack that bishop, isn't it? And not allow my bishop to get locked up. Oh, I'm doing weird stuff again. Keep doing it. Whom else do we have? Mr. Pawn Grabber. Pawn Grabber inquiring about the Budapest Gambit. Hi Jan. Well, we all know the Budapest Gambit is nothing to be scared about. That is true. Well, what is white's best plan against the sideline for g5? Many thanks in advance and greetings to Hamburg. Also to your alter ego with the sunglasses. Right, I'll pass that on. Yeah, this 4 g5 is playable, but it's not great. I think Wojciech once lost a game to, I don't know, who was Mamoudjarov maybe? And I checked it a little bit after that, but my computer was already going mental about black's position. So let's put it on the board. e5 takes, bishop f4, g5, bishop g3, bishop g7. Bishop d2 is also possible, but I think bishop g3 is best. Bishop g7 or knight c6 doesn't matter, it's the same position. We get this, and here the key, or well, not the key, but it was strong to challenge this construction immediately. h4, knight e5, knight e5, and to play knight c3. If mistaken, I am not. In that game, g4 was played, and here, apparently, according to my computer, h5 would have been very strong. Radek played something else, I guess e3, and he also got a bit of an edge. But might as well go for punishment with h5. There's two ideas. One is to chase this bishop around with h6, and if black goes h6, then bishop h4 is very strong. Let's say bishop f6 takes, where, knight d5. And I refuse to analyze this position further, because white is much better. A lot of space, a lot of holes around the black king. Almost winning. Almost winning, it's a bit strong, but much better. Tactical point seems to be that after knight c4, which of course was my cautious first point, white seems to be winning after knight to d5, and there's no defense. d6, queen a4 check is a bit of a problem. Bishop h4 also a bit of a problem. So this doesn't work, and yeah, try for yourself. There is no way to get out of here alive. Bishop e5, rook c1. Black just collapses. Same story, I guess, after the immediate knight takes c4. I must admit I haven't checked this, but it's hard to believe that black can get away with this stuff being completely undeveloped. So let's check what the engine has to say. Knight c4. Yeah, it says e3 with big advantage already. Knight b2, queen c2 seems to win. And if knight e5, we can just take here. An overwhelming position. Queen g5, knight d5, or knight b5. So yeah, this doesn't quite work, but white has to act energetically to punish it. And I think the key was this h5 move, when black's position is just pretty bad. I hope that helps you for the many games you're going to have against the Budapest Gambit with g5, which everybody seems to be playing. Nah, you're never going to get it on the board. Oh, I did it again. There's Mr. Navarra again. S.R. Chernik points out that this is a Trompovsky. Yep. Lapus Neanul is telling us stuff. Hi Jan, I played the Queen's Gambit, declined as black, and like you, ever since that Carlsen game against Kramnik, I've been trying to find something against the exchange variation. I've been looking into a line Michael Adams has used a few times with an early h6. My question is two-part. First, white plays queen c2 next. What are the critical lines? And do you think black equalizes? Second, is what white can do to avoid queen c2? g4 has been played. Yeah, g4 is no good with h6 included. I believe that's the big point of this h6 move order. Without h6, g4 is interesting here. So yeah, g4 is no good, but this castle's queen d2 I thought was quite playable as well. Played by Giri, white won the game, but at least according to my computer, black was doing okay there. So do you think either of these lines are dangerous for black, or is there something else I'm missing? Thanks in advance for your answer and for all the great work you've been doing for Chess24. Let's bring up a chessboard. Yeah, I've also dabbled in that territory. I'm not thrilled enough to do this or recommend this in my video series, but it's certainly a line I've taken an interest in. Is this the move order? Sorry. Don't be too harsh on me on the move order, even though actually move order is important here. Because I think some people start with h6, bishop h4, and now knight b7. But now there's f3 intending to go bishop f2 after knight h5, which I think is a problem. So black should start with knight bd7 and after knight g2, which is not the only move, of course, but I also consider this the most critical try. Even though for me it would already be a problem that I don't know what to do against knight f3. I don't enjoy these knight h5 setups here all that much. But knight g2 I'm on board with as being the most critical. h6, bishop h4, knight h5, takes. yeah, as I said, I agree that g4 is no good here. And yeah, castles, castles. I used to think that this plan that Giri also played gave white an edge. However, in that game he didn't really achieve all that much, so I agree with that conclusion as well. I can't recall how the game went, but somehow black got in bishop f5 and more or less equalized. So I kind of agree with everything. I don't like it because I'm not comfortable with these queen c2 positions. I'm not sure how bad they are. Like, let's say knight b6, rook b1, bishop e6, or maybe even better, a5, a3, bishop e6, something like this. b4. The move order wasn't very precise, but just to make my point, many guys are quite comfortable playing a position like this. I'm not that comfortable with it. I don't really like it. I mean, there's people who are very confident that they can defend such a position and don't consider such stuff a problem. I don't like it for black, and probably I wouldn't recommend it, but this might be lack of understanding or lack of class on my part. Also, yeah, you could argue about a4 in such a position. As I said, I'm not 100% sure I have all the details down here, if you want to go a5 or not, but I wouldn't be feeling very much at home, and I don't see that much active play for black. So yeah, we might be in a similar spot. This, I don't want to play it, is the bottom line, so I'm not gonna investigate it too deeply. But normally whatever Mickey Adams does, he's putting a lot of thought into it, and it's gonna be tough to break down completely. So I'm not against it, but I wouldn't be all that comfortable with it. Also here, instead of rook a b1, you could argue for this plan they usually do with rook a1, knight c1, knight b3, knight c5, with the queen keeping an extra eye on f5, so there's no queen g5, bishop f5. And once again, I think white is a little better here, but it's certainly not an unplayable position. As for plans, yeah, I don't really know. You probably go rook e8, and if I go knight c1, I don't know. That's my problem. I don't know plans. Knight f6, let's say f3. I think white is a bit better. That's what I think. So yeah, I'm not sure how inspiring that little speech was, but this is how I feel. I keep saying that. Mainline Novelty 79 is asking, Hi Jan, how do you recommend playing as black against the Ragozin line cd5, ed5, bishop g5? It's sort of the main line, or used to be the main line. So mainline Novelty 79, I'm sure has something up his sleeve there already. But what would I do? I don't know. I'm not much of a Ragozin player. I kind of keep up to date with stuff, but not that up to date. So it seems that recently in this main line, yeah, it has gone a little out of fashion. I'm not exactly sure what the reason is. Levon has been toying with this setup, which is interesting. Go knight e4, grab the bishop, take it from there, and yeah, mixed results, but he's been doing this. And since you're asking me, I would probably go for this line, which recently has become a little more trendy, h6, bishop h4, and now just the dumb move castles. No one used to play like that. It used to be considered almost a mistake to castle so early in the Ragozin, because in so many lines you want to go g5, knight e4. Your king is here already, but turns out that this is a pretty tricky setup. After e3, black goes bishop f5, follows up with knight bd7. Of course, there's lots of details. Queen b3, bishop c3, bc, knight bd7 has to work and so on. But it seems like it kind of does. And if not e3, if white stops bishop f5 by going queen c2, then black is in time with c5 counterplay anyway, because the queen is not always ideal here. And black follows up with a quick knight c6 or a quick cd4. And it seems like he's alive as well. So currently that's probably what I would do, but I'm not a Ragozin player. I just noticed that there's a bit of a trend, and I liked what I saw. What time is it? We're 90 minutes in. I'll keep going for a bit. Apologies in advance, should I not get to everybody. Normally, since I'm not gonna lie, I do prepare for these things in advance. Not that long, but I have a glance at it. Normally I kept that stuff at around 7 p.m. or an hour before the show, and I don't put in a lot of the new questions, but it really depends on like how healthy I'm gonna feel, how cranky I'm gonna get in from here on, how many questions we'll get through. But let's just keep going instead of starting the whining, which is wasting everybody's time and not answering KP Raba 54's question. Hi Jan, I'm playing chess for last 1 year and I'm 62 with rating of 1346. Isn't that beautiful? You can start chess at any age, and KP Raba, I'm assuming, is enjoying it so far. He's chosen 1 c4 as his opening with white and is doing okay. I run into trouble handling 1 c6 and e6, leading to d5, where I am at c whether to gambit away the c4 pawn or not. Can you explain the positional ideas for white with this king bishop on fianchettoed after dc4, once or at a later stage? I can try. So you go c4 and you don't like it when they come after your c-pawn, which I understand. I think we have to differentiate. If they go e6, let's say you go g3, d5, bishop g2, you almost never have to gambit that pawn. If they go dc4, you can always recapture with queen a4. Still keep a little pressure thanks to this long bishop on this diagonal. Same thing if, let's say, knight f6, knight f3 is played. dc4, you can always go queen a4 check. And if they go c6 here and you're uncomfortable with gambiting this dude, you can always play b3 or queen c2. Cover it and take it from that. That's not a big concession to make. The trickier part is when they go c6. Let's say you go knight f3, d5, because here going g3 is playable, but this is a proper, super complicated pawn sacrifice line where you have to be ready after castles. It's hard to explain general ideas here. This is move by move stuff. The current main line is knight bd7, queen c2, knight b6, knight a3. Highly complicated stuff. So I'm not sure if this is your cup of tea so much. But here it's hard to avoid them grabbing this pawn. So I would maybe recommend to make an exception from your fianchetto, this bishop rule, and just defend the pawn here. Go e3, then play knight c3, then maybe play d4. After e3, knight f6, knight c3. Typically black goes e6 here because, well, this is maybe a bit over your head, I'm not sure. But bishop f5 or bishop g4 have their own drawbacks here because you can try to exploit the weaknesses of the queen side. After cd, for example, queen b3 is a bit unpleasant for black. So normally black goes e6, and here you can play a system with b3, bishop b2, or a system with d4, depending on your likings. So that's probably what I would do. However, this line with g3, it's completely playable. It's just very different from your normal situations if black grabs on c4. And I don't have any general advice. It's very move by movie. Sorry for breaking the bad news. Ayush says, it is just great show. Thanks, Ayush. Go premium, then you can ask your own question. Cardesi says, hi Jan, please explain the King's Indian. All of it. Thank you. I want to play it, but it's confusing. Not going to be able to do it in this format. I'm just as confused as you. However, I can recommend, and this I can recommend serially for a change, because I've praised a lot in the past, and I really think it's good. Mr. Robin van Kampen has a video series on the site exclusively on the King's Indian. And since you want all of it explained, I believe you're much better off spending 3-4 hours with a serious expert on the King's Indian, like Grandmaster van Kampen, than me giving you a random answer within 2 minutes and saying best of luck. Spend some time on Robin. It's worth it. It's an excellent series. Ale Arroyo is saying, hi Jan, thanks for your great show. I want a solid approach against the King's Indian. So do I. It's the two of us. Do you think the fianchetto variation of the King's Indian defense is good for white? It is important to play e4 in that structure at some point. Kind regards. Another reasonably general question where probably I won't be able to say that much. But yeah, I do think the fianchetto thingy is absolutely one of the main lines. And the repertoire of many top grandmasters these days, thing you always have to keep in mind with the fianchetto is you also gotta be ready for the Grunfeld things with c6, d5 or an immediate d5. So there's a lot of taking that into account. Well, after d6 castles, black has tons of options at his disposal. So it's hard to say in general. You should always go e4 or not. Like knight c6, knight c3, a6 is a different world than knight c6, knight c3, e5 or knight c6, knight c3, bishop f5. All of those are very different worlds from c6, knight c3, queen b6 or knight bd7, knight c3, e5, where in this position you probably want to go e4. So I think you get the idea that, yeah, it's a lot of work in many different branches, but I certainly do believe that it's one of the most valid approaches to fight against the King's Indian if you're not too uncomfortable with the option of going c6, of black going c6, d5. However, most King's Indian players, in fairness, don't do that. So it's probably more of a problem if you're a super GM dealing with all these Grunfeld guys than if you're preparing for meeting a King's Indian player. And as for going e4 or not, it depends. The good old expert answer on any question. What have I done now? Oh, what is this? And we're back. Lucian's Parachute saying, hello Jan, in your d4 repertoire series you recommend a system with d3 against the stonewall. I do. A recent game of mine went knight c3, dc, knight c6, e4, e5 position on this board. In that way, black seems to have improved over the line you're giving, which goes with 5c6. Black now has his knight on c6 instead of the pawn, which can in some cases sometimes jump to d4. I understand. And generally, he has less developing problems with the game opening up. How do you suggest to react to this move order? With an earlier trade on d5 maybe? That's certainly an option. You're not the only one who had a recent game in this. This is the position from Vladimir Kramnik against Magnus Carlsen in this rep tournament they played in Leuven. So, yeah, people have been catching on to your secrets, or vice versa. What's my answer to that question? I think the solution you pointed out is absolutely possible, and I also think that, hang on, think that this position on board, even though I kind of agree that in this move order this is a better setup than going c6, I also think that this position is probably still better for white. After bishop g5, Carlsen played king h8, here the machine spits out rook c1, and I've clicked around a little bit. I didn't manage to equalize for black here either, so I believe that this is not a real cause for concern. It was, as usual, an expert choice by Magnus as a surprise for a rapid game, but I don't think it's gonna be the end of days for white here. So I think this is one very possible solution. Just play this position, go bishop g5, and you're better. And the alternative you pointed out yourself. My move order was going for an early c6 to slightly discourage cd5. After, let's say, castles here, just take here and now go knight c3. And I'm still curious what black wants to do. If he goes c6 or c5, no, if he goes c6, e4 is still pretty strong. If he goes c5, well, c5 is just a bad move. Queen b3 already wins material, I guess. So probably black wants to go knight c6 here. But that, it works kind of well against e4 lines, doesn't work so well against d4 lines, in my opinion. So here after d4, I would still choose white for sure. Queen b3 might also be a move. And I'm not sure which line tempts me more. Yeah, probably I go queen b3 here. CD, or the line I mentioned where you allow this dc4 and then go bishop g5 in the position on the diagram. So while I agree that this is a better version than the position after c6 you got, I still don't think it's very good, and you do give white this extra option, cd, ed, knight c3, which also strikes me as extremely tempting for white. So I don't think it solves all of black's problems. What else do we have? I'm sure there's more. There's always more. It never stops. Lucian's Parachute says, thanks, you're welcome. Grandmaster Passion, what is the best answer to the Berlin? Figured the key is to push the white d-pawn early, but should I do it on move 5, 4, 3 or 1? If there is no good answer, do you think e4, e5, knight c3, knight f6, knight f3 is a good try? With the idea of playing the Berlin with an extra tempo if black plays bishop b4. I'm guessing this is humor. So I personally go d4 on move 1 to stop the Berlin. Then you gotta live with the Grunfeld, so maybe d4 is not the answer here. Maybe c4 is the answer on move 1. And as for your other line, I'm not so sure that more than, let's say, 7% of players will play 3 bishop b4. So that hope might be a little optimistic, and I'm not sure it's gonna make me a convert to the Vienna. But thanks for the contribution. Let's Beast is saying, hi Jan, long time no see. I recently started to study the Caro-Kann and found an interesting and quite aggressive variation with 3b5. It's kind of a crappy variation too. I think it's rarely played, especially at top level. What's your take on this move? Is there an easy way for white to refute it? Thanks very much. I have a feeling... Well, first of all, welcome back Let's Beast. It hasn't been around for a while, feels like. Or maybe I haven't done the show for a while. I don't know, maybe both. I have a feeling I've answered this very question before, but it might all be in my head. Who can tell? Therefore, I'll just answer it again and say, no, that's a pretty bad line. And I know these things because I've tried to make them work in my exploits to make the Caro-Kann more sexy. I've looked at stuff like this, but it's just bad. a3 is move here, but ed5, b4, knight a4 is just a serious edge for white. cd5, you just go knight c5, and there's problems. The big problem is that after, let's say, e6, knight f6, the same idea works. White goes a3, you gotta take. White goes b4, cements this knight on c5. Then, yeah, you develop your pieces, pick up this pawn on a3 at your own speed, probably with a rook. Go c3 whenever you need to, and you gain a serious advantage out of the opening. Not necessarily winning, I'm sure. People will make a case for, yeah, but you could fight with whatever, preparing e5. But it's not very good, and that's one big enough reason not to do it. If black tries to fight against this a3, goes knight c6, then bishop b5, queen b6, c4. Looks extremely strong, for example, bc, queen a4, and there is problems. So, yeah, I could never make this work. Wouldn't it be beautiful if we could just play 3b5, but I don't think we're able to do it. Sorry. Nico Tira saying, hi Jan, what do you recommend against knight f3, knight f6, b3? Nothing really. It depends what your normal openings are, Nico Tira. So I would need more information. Had you told me, hi Jan, I'm a King's Indian player and I would like to know what to do against knight f3, knight f6, b3. I would probably tell you, go g6 and then put the bishop on g7. Tell me, hi Jan, I'm a classical Queen's Gambit player. I would like to know what to do against knight f3, knight f6, b3. I would probably tell you, go d5 and e6. Don't worry about a thing. Just develop your pieces. This is fine. Had you said, I'm a Slav player, I might have answered, Then go d5, bishop g4, or go d5, c6, and then bishop g4, or bishop f5. Put your bishop outside of the pawn chain, no problems. Had you said, I don't know what else you could have said. I'm a headshot player. Maybe I would have said go b3, b6, bishop b7, c5, e6. So the answer is, it depends. It's not a very challenging setup. You can do pretty much whatever you like, and it's going to be roughly equal. Be it g6, be it d5, e6, be it d5, c5, be it d5, c6. But it's certainly playable for white if white just wants to play a game of chess without a lot of theory. Oops, I did it again. FIDE-master Achilethista 3000 is saying, "Hi Jan, what do you recommend against the Blumenfeld?" The Blumenfeld is a gambit, and being the famous gambiteer that I am, I recommend meeting fire with fire and gambiting the gambit with a counter gambit. Does that make any sense? Well, Blumenfeld you typically get via this move order: e6, knight f3, c5, d5, b5. Now, in the old days, I used to play either bishop f4 or bishop g5 and sometimes dabble with d, e, c, b5. But nowadays, with these crazy aggressive computers, I believe current knowledge is that e4 is a problem here for black. Looks mad, but it kind of works. Just offering a pawn sacrifice to counter this pawn sacrifice. e4, knight takes e4, bishop d3. And good luck making it out of the opening, Blumenfeld-eskers. Main line is something like knight f6, knight c3, if b4, knight e4. It's just very unpleasant for black. And if bc, bishop c4, I believe this is what they play. But it's very, very hard to get out of the opening alive here. It's a very, very strong counter gambit. And I believe, even pawn lover that I am, I would venture that little enterprise and go e4. Now you can check it a little bit. There's also moves like knight to d6, but also here after cb5. It doesn't really look like black is in decent shape. So I believe that's a problem for you Blumenfelders out there. And that is gonna cause, or has already caused, a steep decline in Blumenfeld popularity. Else, yeah, if you're just too greedy, grab that pawn. I understand if the urge is there. But this might be a decent case to swindle the swindler, bluff the bluffer, gambit the gambiteer. Go e4 here yourself. Long essay here by Fradady. Oh, am I missing somebody? Yeah, I'm missing Where is your mic? Hi Jan, what would you recommend against the Rubenstein variation of the Nimzo, where white goes 4 e3 followed by 5 knight g2? In general, I like to play against the usual double c-pawn structure, but white's mentioned setup is exactly designed to avoid this. So how should I proceed from there if I want to have a game with winning chances? Not only defending against the white central pawn movement. Thanks in advance and keep up the good work. Big topic, winning chances, as usual. But I know a little something about that, so I might as well answer, give you a little sneak preview for hopefully the third part of my video series, since I've started working on expanding my Nimzo Indian knowledge a bit. You didn't give me that much info here, because you didn't say what fourth move you prefer, but I'm gonna assume that we have similar tastes and we both like to move castles here, because that's what I like. And then the move for 5 knight g2. Here, the main move is d5, which is fine, but it's not all that inspiring. These positions after a3, bishop d6, c5, or bishop e7, whatever, cd5 or knight f4. Like, I've always been not the biggest of fans. I used to play rook e8, which I still think is kind of playable, but there's some things that are bothering me a tiny little bit. So I currently like this move c6, which looks very weird. And it's not my normal super classical style, which would be to go d5, but I have some sympathy for it, and you explicitly ask for winning chances. So this is a little goofier than the other lines, keeping some options open. a3, the point is you go bishop a5, and you want to tuck this bishop away on c7. And at the same time, you're preparing d5, when after cd, you can now recapture with the c-pawn, which would not work, not make white's setup look very inspiring. So the critical try is something like b4, bishop c7, e4, d5, which looks a little scary, or maybe it doesn't. Looked a little scary to me at first, e5, knight fd7, but I've checked this a bit and I've come to the conclusion that black has enough play against the white center. Some kinky lines here like knight f4, a5. Give you a little sneak preview for the series. Rook b1 takes, and I think c5 worked, which, yeah, was asking serious questions. bc, bishop a5, bishop d2, knight c6, and the white could not keep his center, and black was doing fine. So, of course, there's more lines, but I felt a little sympathy for this c6, bishop a5 idea, and that's what I would recommend. As you mentioned, after knight g2, it doesn't make a lot of sense to give up our bishop, so might as well keep it and tuck it away here. Hope that helped a little bit. Do we have anybody else? Now it's Mr. Fradady and his reasonably long essay. Doesn't even fit on the screen. What's up, Fradady? Hi, Jan. I seem to have figured out my opening repertoire quite well with a combination of your videos, Peter Svidler's videos, some third-party books, and some of my own works. Glad to hear that. That's how you do it. Always gotta put in some work yourself. However, with a proper repertoire comes a lot of memorization. Recently I had a game in your queen c2 Nimzo mainline with 5 knight f3, 8 knight c4. I'd figured out a draw there at home for myself as black, but I forgot to insert a small move and my position was completely lost. Yeah, that's one of the ideas of that line. Even if you think you have a draw, or even if you have a draw, white doesn't have any risk and is cruising. How do you remember all the theory that you have looked at? I don't. I really don't. I seem to have a problem of mixing up similar looking positions or not remembering in exactly which position I'm supposed to play my well-researched idea. These things happen a lot in, say, the Italian, where all the positions look very similar. Yep. Also, I have a hard time dealing with transpositions. I understand my question is a little bit abstract, but hopefully you can give me an answer. Not sure I can. I can't remember a thing. Or, well, I know it doesn't come across that way, but when it comes to long, deep analysis, if you quiz me on my notes, I can't remember a thing. So normally you just prepare for the game and try to look at what you've studied before the game and put it into your short-term memory and hope it's there during the game. And then, yeah, like preparing for a test, have it gone after the game again. And also the more research you do yourself or you keep up with trends, I think the more you gain an understanding for why this happens here and why this happens there. Because when it comes to trying to remember computer moves or moves that are featured in my or Svidler's video series, it's gonna be a very hard time to keep it all in your head. I can't remember many things from my series if I don't review them. So yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have a real good solutions. Sometimes it helps to make yourself a little short summary of these things are important. But it's very hard for anybody to depend on memorizing lots of information and having it available at all times, I don't think. It can be done. It's either, prepare a lot for every individual game or a mental thing. Be more comfortable even if you're out of book. Like with my pet openings in the Marshall, I've been out of book or couldn't remember my theory a million times, but then you gotta switch back to your instincts and patterns you've seen and so on. But it is a topic we're all struggling with. Otherwise, I have a big hole in my repertoire as a Nimzo Queen's Gambit player. c4, knight f6, knight c3 forces you to either play e6 and deal with that somewhat dangerous Mycena, I guess that's 3 e4, or learn e5, c5. Yep, that is true. I'm not sure how dangerous the Mycenas is. I guess people are doing okay there. And what system would you recommend after c4, knight f6, knight c3, e5? That's your second question technically, so I'll keep it real brief. As I said earlier, I believe the best is to play d5 and put the knight on b6. You're saying it's not to your taste, but that's what I would recommend. So cheers, Fradady. Sorry, I can't help you that much. blitz dating, saying, "Hello Jan, I'll put into your own words. So many questions in so little time." Indeed, we're 2 hours in already. So I'll make it short. Black side interests, Moscow variation. After bishop f6, queen f6. Why we play e3, right? I don't know, but that is the main move. What are a dynamic setup for black? Should he fianchetto his black bishop or not? Can you tell me, please? I can some strategical plans. Nah, I can never do that, you know me. Not a big strategist. It will help me to understand the position. I always want to fight for a win, but in this position it seems very hard for me. Thanks a lot for any advice, Jan. You're my last hope. Something went wrong if I'm your last hope there. What other sources did you pursue and not get any information that I'm your last hope? That story, that narrative does not sound believable to me. Anyway, let's tell you something. First of all, once again, this logic, I really want to play for a win, but here I find it hard. I'm confused by it. You already have the 2 bishops, so this is quite a sharp position strategically. And what black normally wants to do, since you want to plan, you want to go g6, bishop g7, castles, knight d7, b6, bishop b7, dc4, open the position with either c5 or e5, and enjoy your 2 bishops. Now, there's a lot of subtleties after the main move e3. I prefer going g6 here immediately. Knight d7 used to be the main line. Nowadays g6 is a valid line in its own right. There are some pluses for delaying knight d7. For example, after bishop d3, bishop g7, castles, castles, e4. Black has the option of going queen d8, covering his d5 pawn, which would be less good with the knight already on d7. So white has adjusted to that, and they start playing bishop e2, bishop g7, castles, castles. And at a high level, white will understand that black has this very easy long-term plan of going knight d7, b6, bishop b7, dc4, c5 or e5, and fully equalizing or already gaining an advantage with the 2 bishops. So they will normally try to go e4. And here, there's many sharp options. Queen d8 is once again a move which has been played by top players. There's also the option of going c5, making things real messy. And there's the latest trend, which is to go knight d7, ed, ed, cd, c5. Once again, spicing up the position. So I'm not sure if that's what you wanted to hear. I guess you wanted to hear more general things. But in general, the black position is fine. So you just gotta figure out a way to defend yourself against these quick e4s from white. And I would go g6, bishop g7, then have a look around. Hope that's gonna help. But long term, you have winning chances already. You don't need to do anything crazy. Just get your piece in the game and have those bishops be bishops. The Dark Horde is saying, "Hi Jan, in the Panov isolated d-pawn complex that arises after, let's say, e4, c6, d4, d5, ed, cd, c4, knight f6, knight c3, knight c6. Knight c3. The move knight c6 always bothered me a bit. Well, it is the main move. I don't like the variations after knight f3, bishop g4, cd5, the whole sequence toward the drawish endgame. Understandably, even though, yeah, no, I agree with that. Does white have any alternatives? The answer is yes, there is the alternative. And nowadays, mainline bishop g5 instead of knight f3, which I will put on the board in no time. So yeah, this is the critical move. I believe personally that black is fine here with a bunch of different moves, which is one of the reasons why the Panov is not so popular. I believe e6 is fine, I believe dc4 is fine, and I believe bishop e6. I'm not sure if this is fine, but it leads to interesting play. So that is the only alternative you have though, if you want to go for this. Else, if you want to stay in Panov territory, but mix it up a little, you might want to consider some stuff like this, which is not exactly winning, but at least it's a fresh position. Now bishop b5 check or knight c3, knight takes d5, knight f3, and you've gotten Some black players out of book here, knight c6, you can go bishop b5, and it's a little different, even though it's not really winning either. So in the move order you gave, go bishop g5, and lot of stuff to learn, but that's the way to go. Saba, whose name I will never learn to pronounce in spite of my best efforts. It's because I'm dumb, you've told me a million times. But I'll never manage to get it done properly. Is asking, GM Williams, do you guys see this? I have a lot of double stuff here. GM Williams recommended the variation d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7, e4, d6, bishop e2, castles, bishop e3 against the King's Indian, often playing f3, g4. Is it legit? I really like his presentation, but I get the feeling he's sometimes ignoring some good black responses. I must admit, I'm not familiar with the material, but it's a playable line as far as I know. Can't say I've ever investigated it all that deeply, but I do think it's a playable line. I'll go d6 here, bishop e3. Guess we're assuming black goes e5, d5, and now of course it depends on what black wants to do. Like typical King's Indian move would be knight a6 or a5 followed by knight a6. So I'm guessing Mr. Williams, aggressive player, wants to go g4 here. Knight c5, f3, something like this. I think, yes, it's playable. I'm not aware of any refutation. Leads to a very sharp play, as I'm sure you can imagine, after c6 or a5 or whatnot. But not necessarily bad. One problem is this knight, but if this knight ever makes it here, probably after h4, because if you go knight h3 early, h5 is going to be an issue. So if you manage to get in whatever, h4, knight h3, knight f2, queen d2, white can get a good position. So I'm not hating it, I'm not a specialist at all, but it's a playable line, not against it really. What else do we have? Botvinnik, non-premium Botvinnik is answering the questions. Not sure that's the idea, but thanks for helping out. Bobby Fischer 1970 says Jan is the best, loves from Denmark. Cheers, Bobby Fischer. Junior chess team. Hi Jan, best way to deal with the knight bd2 Catalan after check on b4. Yeah, it's surprisingly a pretty decent move. Most people don't do that, but it's a decent move, and I'm thinking, well, as I'm sure you know, my favorite move is to go bishop e7, not bishop b4 check, for not dealing with this. But if I carelessly go all the way and give this check, knight b2, like dc4 has to be the critical test, but I have a feeling it's falling a bit out of fashion and white has some pretty decent options there. So I would probably go castles and then b6 and saying, haha, your knight is misplaced on d2, should be on c3 for the structure. Say castles, bishop b7, normally white should take here. And now ed, normally I dislike the structure for black, but with a knight on d2, I guess it's sort of reasonable. Stops white from developing his bishop, and it really wants to be on c3. So sometimes you even see white like putting this knight back to b1. Probably go rook c1, let's say bishop d6. Knight b1, doing something like this. But it seems to me that black gets reasonably playable positions here. So I would probably for once recommend to not be greedy, but just castle, go b6, bishop b7, and you get an equalish position. Hope that helped. If you were hoping for me to grab the pawn, which normally I always do, I always grab the pawn, I'm sorry. Raytap 81 is asking, I think we're reaching more or less the end of this show, but I'll try to get through a few more before falling asleep. Hi Jan, for most of his career, Bobby Fischer was predictable in his use of openings and variations in those openings. Despite the seeming disadvantage, it was very difficult for opponents to exploit this limitation because Fischer's knowledge of the openings and variations that he used was extensive. Do you think the same approach could be successful at present? Maybe everybody would think they can prepare very good against someone with few openings, but if this person practices these openings since years, wouldn't it be impossible to catch him off guard? Yeah, on a broader scale you can still make that argument that it's worth specializing. Of course, times have changed. Computers being the big equalizer, like nowadays playing 6 bishop c4 against the Sicilian all the time. Or, yeah, some of Fischer's lines just haven't stood the test of time, others have. Would be a bit tough, and also it's tougher with white if you're not flexible, but if you keep doing the same thing, it's just, yeah, people will play lines that they've more or less finished with computers and you don't need years. Fischer just outworked everybody, that's why he could get away with this. But nowadays, with a computer, you don't need to put in that many hours. You can just check something. If you know your opponent's gonna play bishop c4 against the knight of every game, or whatever it is, then yeah, I don't think that approach works. But it still works to be a specialist and play a fewer playing field, especially with black, and to a lesser extent with white as well. And yeah, just using time there to go into depth rather than going broad. So I'm not sure. If you want to hear Fischer would still be the greatest, I don't know that. He was amazing, but times have changed and I don't like cross-era comparisons. So probably you want to look at modern guys where you have some that have a more narrow opening repertoire, like let's say Kramnik or Aronian, but are still incredibly dangerous, or some guys that are more broad, like Nakamura, like Caruana to some extent, but can play pretty much everything. Stefan P. 99 saying, "Hi Jan, great that you're doing this show again. My question is not strictly an opening question, but I hope it fits into this context. I've been dabbling with 1 knight f3 instead of my usual 1 d4 to increase my flexibility in the opening. As a result, I often find myself in some type of Maroczy structure. In a lot of these positions, I've heard strong players say that white has an edge due to space advantage. That is true. But I have the problem that I really don't know how to do with all that beautiful space, and don't find these positions easy to play at all. I now have to prevent black from playing b5 and d5 breaks, but I have trouble to find a positive plan to improve my own pieces. What are typical middle game plans in these structures?" Yeah, I'm not sure how much that fits into our context, but yeah, I kind of can relate. And there was also the question, I'm sorry, I switched it off, if I can recommend some model games. Not really, actually. I've never studied any model games on these, whatever it is, hedgehog structures. Maroczy structures. How do we get one? I play the Maroczy every other game. Now I'm struggling to get a Maroczy structure. Let's say something like this, yeah? I don't know. White is better. Like there's this rule of thumb that white is better with 4 pieces on the board. That's why I, for a long time, have played this knight c2 move, which I still quite like. Then you just try to keep all the pieces on the board. Go castles, bishop d2, rook c1, b3, f3. Take it from there. Often a later plan is to go knight d5, ask black for a concession, either to give up the bishop, which is often on e6, and then after bishop d5 go e d5, or provoke the move e6. But yeah, it's very hard to speak about it in direct terms and plans. Probably it's hard for me to speak in plans. You're kind of right. You don't want them to go e6. Well, it's very hard for them to go b5 or d5 anyway. So don't let them do that, and then just imagine if it's hard for you to find a plan, how hard it must be for black. But often this comes with practice. It's more about frustrating black, keeping the status quo, because long term, if black doesn't get any active play in the first, let's say 20, 30 moves, he is worse, because he is worse long time, because of the space disadvantage. Now the decent rule of thumb is that if there's only one pair of minor pieces left, typically horses, white is also seriously better. And then he can pursue either a breakthrough with c5 or the same tactic of going knight d5, provoking a weakness. The one thing you want to be careful about is being left with his light square bishop against a black knight or against a black dark square bishop. So yeah, don't keep that dude. And I'm sorry, I don't know any model games. I'm sure there are some, I just don't know them. But white is better, that much I'm pretty confident about. And before you guys sue me and say why it's better in that knight c2 position, I was mainly speaking about Maroczy structures in general. There's many different breeds of it. Marcelinho has a second question, but sorry Marcelinho, rules are rules, one question per person. Kiftir, do we have a Kiftir question already? I guess not. Anyway, let's see what he's up to. Hello Jan, thanks for your great work at Chess24, although I must say Radio Jan is better. I understand. Anyway, how do you think black should face the Mora Gambit? Especially in a blitz game. e4, c5, knight f3, knight c6, d4, c takes d4, c3. Thanks again, Ritvik. Did you have a question already? Can I search for these things? I can't remember stuff. Maybe he fooled me with the things again. But I can't remember, so maybe you got lucky with the second question. I'm gonna assume no. The problem is I also don't know the answer, especially in a blitz game context. I haven't really studied the Mora Gambit. I've had to answer this question in earlier shows, and I think I've given different answers pretty much every time. Sometimes I say just grab the pawn and then go d6, e6, or grab the pawn and then go e6, a6. Sometimes I say don't grab the pawn, go d5. Takes, and now play this. Nah, you don't want this position. I don't think I ever say that. See, I'm useless. Sometimes I play knight f6 here, but you've given me this very tough condition that we're starting with 2 knight c6, which normally I don't. Most Mora Gambit guys, they don't go knight f3 and play the Mora Gambit after knight c6, d4, because they're too afraid of black going d6 when their Mora Gambit doesn't make sense anymore. And after you take here, knight f6 is fine for black. So they would go for the Mora funkiness immediately, which gives you a little more leeway to play knight f6, e5, knight d5, and now after cd, or knight f3 to play with e6 instead of knight c6, which is what I prefer doing. So, long story short, I can't answer your question, because I don't know any better. I don't know at all. I don't even know any better or worse. I'm not all that concerned about the Mora Gambit, which maybe one day I have to concern myself with it. My instinct would be to not accept it, because I've always been very comfortable with this position, especially in a blitz game. Hope that helps. Probably doesn't help. And I'm gonna feel bad about that. Are we through my list? See, now left me off in the middle of nowhere again. I believe there's one more question that I got before the show. Let's answer that one and then call it a day. Apologize to everybody whom I didn't get to. Next time, it's first come, first serve. See, I can't even do expressions anymore. I've become a useless opening monkey. I once again clicked the wrong button. And Fisherman02 is saying, what is a good setup against the Dutch? I've played my last games with 2g3, but every time I get very drawish or worse positions. Sorry to hear that, Fisherman02. I don't think we can necessarily blame 2g3 for that. That is a pretty good move. It's, in fact, the main move in this position. But if you really don't like it, you can try, for example, knight c3. It's a pretty decent move. After knight f6, bishop g5, you go d5. They go d5, you go e3, get your pieces out. Bishop d3, knight f3, castle, knight e2, c4, put some pressure. Or if they go d5, you more or less do the same thing, but this time with the bishop on f4, you go e3, knight f3, bishop d3, castle, knight c2, and put some pressure. So, yeah, that's the best 8-second setup against the Dutch non-g3 territory that I have. And hopefully it will improve your results and stop you from getting these drawish positions. A lot of drawish positions to be avoided today. So that's it for today. My voice is slightly disappearing. Thank you guys for watching. No apologies. I think apologies are more a Banter Blitz thing, not an opening clinic thing. Sorry to those questions which I didn't get to yet. Post them earlier so I can see them next time around. Thanks for sticking around. And I hope we all learned some valuable lessons. I always learn something doing these shows. This is one reason. I don't do them that often. But I got a lot of good questions that make me question some of my judgment as well. So thanks for that. Thanks for your questions. Thanks for sticking around. Hope you liked it or learned something or both. Enjoy the rest of the evening or the morning whenever you're watching this. I do not know. Later.